6:17 now on Daybreak, and today is February 1st, marking the start of Black History Month. Now we celebrate a major milestone in civil rights history.
Now, we know Niagara-on-the-Lake is a quaint little village, but as we find out in this week's Unknown Story, it was also the center of the very first legislation that paved the way to the end of slavery. The Niagara Parkway was once called the prettiest Sunday drive in the world by Winston Churchill, or so the legend goes.
Well, we sure say that. We use that a lot.
Jim Hill is the senior manager of Heritage for Niagara Parks. He says dotted along the 35-mile trek from Fort Erie to Niagara-on-the-Lake are points of history, most notably history related to the fight against slavery.
But really, like on both sides of the border, the river is this important gateway and travel route, had been for thousands of years.
It was certainly a landing pad for freedom seekers traveling the Underground Railroad, but also the road to abolition for much of Canada. Niagara-on-the-Lake was named Newark in the late 1700s and was the capital of Upper Canada.
And of course, on this side of the border, there have been a lot of black soldiers who'd fought in Ranger regiments and against guys like George Washington. So they were pushing for an outright ban.
It was here that the very first law of its kind was passed. Navy Hall, which is now part of the Fort George campus, was the home to the first provincial parliament of Upper Canada, a body that in 1793 passed the Act Against Slavery.
It's the first act against slavery in the British world.
This act did not free the enslaved, but it prevented enslaved people from being brought into or sent out of Upper Canada. It was a bill printed right here in this very room, possibly on this very press at Mackenzie Printery. It's now a museum, and they even have a copy of the bill on display.
This is the oldest printing press in Canada, one of the oldest in North America.
Such legislation certainly called for celebration at a spot where you can still raise a glass today, the Old Angel Inn. It was known then as the Harmonious Coach House, and although records from the time are a bit sketchy, it's believed that the legislators celebrated the event over dinner at the inn, just one of the many events and places that shaped our region.
So there's just a mountain of history that really changed how both countries developed over time and built friendships. So.
Probably celebrated over a plate of poutine and some fish and chips, right?
Maybe.
But yeah, that whole stretch, if you drive from Fort Erie all the way up to Niagara-on-the-Lake, there are 250 plaques and monuments along the way. It's just an unbelievable, just kind of a drive through history.
Yeah, and Canada is so much more ahead of the United States when the Civil War was in the 1860s, but we're talking about 1793 there for that act.
And actually at the time, New York State, and they gave props to New York State, they were developing very similar laws. It didn't abolish slavery, but it outlawed the import of people to and from, the export of people. So
fascinating history.
Kids, you don't need to go to school today because you got all the education you need in the last
Don't rely on me. Every teacher I ever had said, so don't rely on him.
Shiny apple on your desk today, Pete.
Very much, sir.
All right, let's get to it.